All right, dividing polynomials, specifically using long division. So your first examples are actually not dividing polynomials. You're dividing, well, you kind of are. You're dividing a polynomial by a monomial. These are the easiest kind of division questions you could possibly see. We're still just going to use our steps we learned on the last video. So when you divide an entire equation by one thing, you can actually simplify that into 3 separate division questions and just simplify it to get your answer. So whenever I work a question like number 1 here, I'm just going to simplify what is 18a to the third divided by 3a plus 30a squared divided by 3a. Okay, so just like the last video, 18 divided by 3 is 6. I subtract my exponents. 30 divided by 3 is 10. I subtract my exponents, and this is my answer. Same thing when I work question number 2. Now don't feel like you actually have to write this step down every time. Sometimes I like to, especially if I have a really complicated looking question like this one. There's a lot going on, so I would highly recommend it on something like this, but maybe not necessarily on something like the first question. Okay, I'm going to start here because this is easy. Those cancel out. 40 divided by 4 is just 10. 24 divided by 4 is 6. I have one m on top, 2 m's on bottom. That means I'm going to have an m on the bottom. I guess I'll put it down here. N to the 6th minus n to the 3rd is an n to the 3rd on top, and this is your answer. All right. The next one, sometimes too, if I want to do this kind of work but I don't necessarily want to write it again, sometimes I'll just write it underneath here. Kind of be a little lazy. There's nothing wrong with that. 12ab squared, and then I can simplify each one this way. 60 divided by 12 is a 5. A squared over a is just 1a. B cubed over b squared is just 1b. Minus 4. A is going to have to stay in the bottom. B squared on top. 84 divided by 12. How about 7? A to the 4th. The b squareds cancel. This is your answer. Okay, so that's the easy part, easiest part of your homework. Please do not forget how to do that. I have seen some of the craziest things with people trying to solve these questions after they learn how to do what we're doing next. So next we're looking at long division of polynomials. So don't freak out. Before we do long division of polynomials, I would just like to remind you of long division in general. So I'm going to make up a completely random number, 5,729. Completely made up off the top of my head. Divided by, just for fun, let's say 11. Okay. When you were in probably elementary school, you learned how to divide like this. Remember what we did. We said, how many times does 11 go into 5? Well, it doesn't, so I'm going to skip that space. How many times does 11 go into 57? 5 times. Then you would say 5 times 11 is 55, but then you would subtract these two things. You would get a 2. You'd bring down this 2. You'd say, how many times does 11 go into 22? 2 times. 2 times 11 is 22. You subtract those and get 0. You bring down the 9. How many times does 11 go into 9? It doesn't go in there evenly, so I put a 0. 11 times 0 is 0. When you subtract, you get a 9. So we would say this is 520 with a remainder of 9. Okay, once upon a time we did that. You could also write that as that's 520 with 9/11ths left. Okay, just a review of long division. We are going to do the exact same thing, but with x's. So sometimes it's a little more complicated, but at the same time, in some ways it's a little easier. You don't have to do quite as much multiplication. You're just looking at your x numbers. So example number 4. We are going to set this up first. So the very first thing, this 2x squared minus 5x minus 3 goes inside, I don't know what you call that, used to call it the house. The x minus 3 goes on the outside. Okay? When I do this, I'm going to say, use the x. What do I do to an x to make it a 2x squared? What do I multiply by x to make it 2x squared? That's a 2x. So that's what I'm going to write up here, 2x. 2x times x is what I want it to be, a 2x squared. 2x times a negative 3 is a negative 6x. But remember when you divided, each time after I multiplied that, I added this subtraction sign to simplify that and see what I had left. So that's what you need to do here too. And this is where you're going to mess up if you're not careful. Okay? I need to subtract these things. When I subtract these things, that is going to change both of my signs for me to simplify. 2x squared minus 2x squared cancels out. You want that to happen. If that doesn't happen, you didn't pick the right thing to multiply by to begin with. Negative 5x plus 6x is a positive x. And then just like long division with numbers, I bring down that minus 3. What do I do to an x to make it an x? I multiply it by 1. So I'm going to put plus 1 up here. 1 times x is just x. 1 times negative 3 is a negative 3. Again, to simplify this, remember you subtract them. That's going to change your signs. X cancels, 3 cancels. My answer is just 2x plus 1. Cool. Let's do another one. Again, m squared goes inside, minus 3m minus 7. Now, what I would actually recommend to you is for you to, if you feel pretty confident about this, you think you can do it, even if you don't think you can, you should set this problem up, pause the video, work it out yourself, and then check your work with me. Or at least start it by yourself until you get stuck, and then come back to the video and check your work with me. That's what I recommend. That's how you learn from watching a video like this. This isn't a real class where we stop and let you work it, or where you can answer questions back and stuff like that. You need to learn how to use these videos to make yourself better at this. Okay? So, same thing. What do I do to an m to make it an m squared? I multiply it by m. M times m squared. M times a positive 2 is a plus 2m. But remember, we subtract these. Subtraction, this becomes a subtraction. When you simplify, these cancel. Negative 3m minus 2m is a negative 5m. I bring down my negative 7. What do I do to an m to make it a negative 5m? I multiply it by a negative 5. Negative 5 times m, negative 5m, negative 5 times 2, negative 10. Again, you change the signs. When I subtract these, it's actually going to change both of those to a positive. These go away. Negative 7 plus 10 is 3. 3 is your remainder. To write your answer here, the way we're going to finish this off, is a plus 3 over what you divided by to begin with. M plus 2. That's your answer. Doesn't that look so much more simplified than it did before? I'm just kidding. Same thing here on the next one, okay? Trick here. Trick here. So, when you are missing certain things, you really need to leave spaces for them. So when I set this equation up, I'm going to put the p minus 1 on the outside, just like normal. But on the inside, I have a p cubed. I have a 0p squared. And I personally recommend go ahead and put the 0p squared. You don't have to, but it's a good placeholder. Plus 0p. Then my minus 6. If you don't do this, then things aren't going to work out like they need to, or you're going to have things in weird places. So like I said, I highly recommend you do this. So same thing as last question. What do I do to a p to make it a p cubed? Again, if you're feeling confident here, pause the video, go ahead and work it yourself. But I'm going to multiply that by a p squared. P squared times p cubed. P squared times negative 1, negative p squared. Again, when you do this, you subtract it, which changes your signs. The p cubes cancel. 0p squared plus p squared is a p squared. I bring down my plus 0p. Same thing for my next question. What do I do to a p to make it a p squared? I multiply it by p. P times p squared. P times negative 1, negative p. But I change my signs. That cancels. This is just p. I bring down my negative 6. What do I do to a p to make it a p? I multiply it by 1. 1 times p is p. 1 times negative 1 is negative 1. Again, though, don't forget to change your signs. Those cancel. You have a remainder of negative 5. So just like the last question, to finish this, I'm going to put minus 5 over p minus 1. Next question, same thing. I'm going to have a t plus 2 and a t cubed minus 6t squared plus 0t plus 1. So same pattern as before. What do you do to a t to make it a t cubed? You multiply by t squared. T squared times t cubed, t squared times 2 plus 2t squared. But don't forget to change your signs. That becomes subtraction. Those cancel. Negative 6t squared minus 2t squared is a negative 8t squared. Bring down the 0t. What do I do to a t to make it a negative 8t squared? Multiply it by negative 8t. Negative 8t times t squared, is a negative 8t squared. Negative 8t times a 2, negative 16t. But remember, you subtract it. When you subtract it, that changes your signs. Those cancel. That's a 16t. I bring down the 1. What do I do to a t to make it a 16t times 16? 16 times t is a 16t. 16 times 2 is a 32. But you change your signs. Those cancel. That's a negative 31 for your remainder. So to finish this, minus 31 over t plus 2. I'm going to skip number 8 because I find it highly annoying. I might come back to it later, but I'm right here for question number 9. So I'm going to go ahead and set that up. X minus 2, under your division sign, 2x cubed minus 5x squared plus 4x minus 4. Cool. What to do to an x to make it a 2x cubed? Multiply it by 2 and multiply it by x squared. 2x squared times x, 2x cubed. 2x squared times a negative 2, negative 4x squared. Change the signs. That's the thing you're going to forget to do. That's a negative 1. You can put the 1. I'm just going to put negative x squared and bring down my 4x. What do I do to an x to make it a negative x squared? Multiply it by negative x. Negative x times x, negative x squared, negative x times negative 2, positive 2x. But again, you change the signs. When you change the signs, those cancel. You're left with 2x. I bring down my negative 4. X times what equals 2x? That's times 2. So plus 2. 2 times x, 2x, 2 times 2, negative 4. When I change my signs, man, I love this question because everything cancels out, and my answer is just 2x squared minus x plus 2. I guess I'll go ahead and work this last one, even though I didn't want to. X minus 1 in the house, x to the 5th, 0x to the 4th, 0x to the 3rd, 0x squared, 0x minus 1. Gross. Whew! All right, let's just do it. What do I multiply by x to equal an x to the 5th? That's an x to the 4th. X to the 4th times x, x to the 5th. X to the 4th times negative 1 is a negative x to the 4th. When you change the signs, those cancel. You're left with an x to the 4th. You bring down the 0. What do you do to an x to make it an x to the 4th? You multiply it by x cubed. X to the 4th minus x cubed. You change the signs. You get an x cubed. You bring down the 0. What do you do to an x to make it an x cubed? You multiply it by x squared. That's an x cubed minus x squared. Change the signs. X squared. You bring down the 0x. What do you do to an x to make it an x squared? You multiply by x. You change the signs. You get x. You bring down the negative 1. What do you multiply x by x to get x by a 1? That's an x minus 1. You change the signs and everything cancels. And this is your answer. Guess that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be.